This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Thank you very much. Formula always is that we start with the Achsanya, so we want to wish Dr. and Mrs. Lewin that they should only have in their home good health and make such wonderful gatherings of simcha and learning at Bias Gil Tzedek. It's interesting that Dr. Lewin should start off by saying that even going to a shir, you could fight about it. The truth of the matter is I often, when I speak about Shalom Bayis, I ask the participants not to use my words against one another. And you hear, even Rabbi Weiss said it. Were you listening to a word that he said? Don't use it that way. Don't use it as a kardim lachbaba. Don't use it as an axe to cut with. But rather, even if you hear just one thing, it's really true that even just for one thing, one little minor adjustment to make, it's already worth the whole share. I'd also like to thank you on a Memorial Day to come and sit inside and learn. It's a challenge. There's a lot of things vying for our attention on this day, and the fact that you came is very appreciated. Very appreciated. I'd like to dedicate the shir L'Refuah Shalema for my wife, Miriam Liba Bas Devora, and also in memory of one of my Talmidos who passed away very suddenly last week. She was talking on the phone to her 90-year-old mother, and while she was talking, she had a massive heart attack and passed away. Mamish, while she was talking to her mother, and she was a subscriber of mine for over 20 years. Those that follow my CDs, she's dedicated tapes in the past, Mrs. Carol Perlman. So we'll learn Ilui Nishmas Perel Bas Pinchas, that her neshama should have an aliyah. And I think that segueing from this into the shir, I'd like to mention I recently started for six years, about five and a little bit more than 5.5 years, I was learning Mishnah Yomis on Kol HaLashon, where I was learning 2 Mishnahs a day. We started at Brachos. I still remember the day that we started because that was the day that the pizza shop burned down in Woodridge. It was a July 4th. And we started learning 2 Mishnayos a day, and we finished in 5.5 years. Anybody who wants to learn this, it's all archived. We have a special number for that share, 718-906-6471, and you could learn 2 Mishnahs a day and finish Shas Mishnayos. But as soon as we finished Shas Mishnayos, I started a share in Orchos Chaim LaHarosh. The Rosh wrote a sefer called Orchos Chaim, how to live life. In other words, literally a path for life, the way of life. And it's a fascinating sefer. I've already given over 30 shiurim on it. We're up to number 50 something in the sefer. It's on TorahAnytime.com. It's on Kol HaLashon, so you can either watch it or listen to it. If you want to watch it, you go to TorahAnytime.com. You go to Musar and Self-Improvement, and my shiurim are there. I think they're highlighted also on the front page, on the home page. So in number 53, the Rosh says something a bit chilling. He says, Al Tinashe means do not forget, Pigias Misa Pisai. Do not forget that death can suddenly come. Uzachar Ma'amad Adin. And remember that then we will have to face a final accounting. So you talk about something that's very sobering. That's sobering. And living in the society that we live in, we hear about these things every day. A 3-car accident, 2 fatalities. a blowout on the road. Rachmana litzlan, the driver was driving 65. He had a blowout. He went right over into a ravine. Somebody was driving, and there was a trailer with a bunch of cars, and one of the cars fell off and crushed the driver. Somebody was walking and didn't see a manhole and fell down a manhole. Opened the elevator and fell down the shaft. We hear stories about sudden death chokings. We hear stories about sudden death all the time. And the Rosh says, Al Tinasha, don't forget, Pegias Misa Pisayim. Don't forget. Now, what the Rosh is doing is he's trying to forewarn us from one of the greatest wiles of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination. And that is to get us to procrastinate. The Yetzer Hara doesn't tell us learning, overrated, learning is overrated. He never tells us that. He says learning, look, when you retire, you retire, so then you can't learn now. You don't have time to breathe. You don't have time for the children. When you retire, of course, that's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Al toimer l'kisha efne eshne. Don't say when I get around to it I will learn. Shema lo tipana. Maybe you'll never get around to it. I can tell you people that told me that they're going to join the DAF when they retire, and when they retire, they tell me, look, I don't have the head for it anymore. My eyesight is no good. I can't sit for an hour. I can't. That's a sobering thought. Al toimer l'kisha efne eshne. Don't say, don't put it off. Here's another thing. A person says, I plan to spend time with my parents. I know I'm not such a good child, but I plan. But right now, the kids are young and the finances are not so good. One of these days, I plan to travel with my parents. But it just doesn't work now. I'm going to tell you a story that stays in my head. I can never get this out of my head. It's one of the most. I've given over 1,000 hespedim in my career as a Rav. Over 1,000. One of the most chilling episodes, and I can keep you riveted with episodes, but one of the most chilling episodes was by a Levaya where the son lost it in front of everybody, ran to it was in Shem Yadas. He ran, old Shem Yadas. He ran to the coffin and started screaming, Ma! How could you do this to me? I had so many plans. I was going to go places with you. How could you die on me? I'll never forget it. Because in his mind, he realized he never spent time with his mother. But he always wanted to. But he put it off. So you have to understand that the Yetzer Hara never tells us, charity, not for everybody. He doesn't say that. He says, right now things are tight, one of these days. So therefore the Rosh gives us sage advice, and he says, Al tinasha pegias misos pisang. Don't forget that the lights could be shut out any moment. And the same thing is true for marriage. There are many people that say to themselves, look, one of these days I'm going to get around to doing it right. Not now. Not now. I have enough problems. One of these days, it is. I realize things are not that good, but, we'll have to tread water. One of these days, I'll start being a romantic. One of these days, but not now. The only thing I might say is that people would ask on this discipline of the Rosh that it seems to be a downer. You're going to start thinking about that, you might die suddenly, It's very hard to enjoy life with that kind of thought, you know? It's hard to go on a trip and say, well, there might be a blowout and we might be gone before we get there, you know? It's kind of and Hashem doesn't want that from us. Hashem wants us to enjoy life. He wants us to have simchas achayim. He wants us to have a zest for life. We know that because He made pistachio nuts. And He made a rose. He wants us to enjoy life. Anybody that tells you differently doesn't know anything. He wants us to have a geschmack. So, but then the Rosh says, don't forget, it might be over. What does that mean? The Navi tells us that daiga, worry, breaks half the constitution of a man. That's what the Navi says. And I've always been fond of saying, it's my own word, that the word that makes up daiga, worry in Hebrew, Dalet Aleph Gimel Hey, has all the letters of the beginning of the Aleph base, right? Aleph Gimel Dalet Hey, except for the base. Because if the base of bitachon is missing, then you have daiga. Then you have worry. Right? So worry seems to be a bad thing. To complicate matters, on Tisha B'Av, if you learn the Kamsa B'Kamsa Gemara, it starts off with the verse, Ashrei Adam Mefachet Tamid. Fortunate is a person who's always fearful. So which one is it? Worry, not worry? Getting confused. So let me explain to you that there's two different types of worry. There's constructive worry and destructive worry. Like Reb Chaim would say, there's zwei dinim in worry. You know? There's constructive worry and destructive worry. Constructive worry is that you're worried about choking during eating, so you don't talk with your mouth full. You don't talk while you're chewing your steak. That's constructive worry. You're afraid of a car accident, so you wear a seatbelt and don't drive like a maniac. That's constructive worry. You're worried about skin cancer, so you put on suntan lotion and you don't stay in the sun for 12 hours straight. That's constructive worry. Destructive worry is not enjoying to eat because you once saw somebody choke. It's not going into a car because you saw a fatality. It's not going outside when it's sunny because somebody got skin cancer. That's destructive worry. So the Rosh is talking about constructive worry. But then you say, but even if it's constructive, if I'm always worried that I might fall down an elevator shaft or I might get electrocuted, that really puts a damper on life. So I have to tell you there's another element. There's a halacha, we all know, that Erev Yom Kippur at Mincha we say vidui. We say the long vidui, al-Chet, al-Shamnu, in Erev Yom Kippur by Mincha. So the Gemara says, why? Why do you say vidui then? It's Itzuma Yishul Yom HaKippurim mechaper. It's Yom Kippur that's mechaper. What are you saying vidui in Mincha the day before? So the Gemara says, you're right, you really shouldn't, but we're afraid that you might choke during the Sudas HaMafsekes, and then you won't have gotten a chance to say vidui, so Mamela say vidui. So, I mean, you know, if you're going to use that logic, then say vidui in the morning too. You might choke in the morning. You know, where does it stop? And how are you supposed to enjoy the Sudas HaMafsekes once the Gemara tells you might choke? So the answer is, and you see, it's how you learn something. The answer is that the Gemara is saying you might choke, it's the last meal, and maybe Hashem doesn't want you to get to Yom Kippur because you are still decreed to die this year, and this is the last chance before Yom Kippur. Say vidui that you shouldn't choke. Because if you say vidui, you won't choke. And that's what the rush means. Sudden death could happen. So start getting your act straight, start getting your priorities straight so sudden death shouldn't happen. That's what he means. When sudden death happens to people, so start learning more because learning protects you. And start doing kibbut avayim because it's l'man yarichon yamecha. Or since there's the specter of sudden death, do whatever you can that it shouldn't happen. And be mavasedra. I can't understand. People run all over the world to get schoolers to live long. And they don't do the most obvious schooler, the first schooler in Shas. for Arichas Yomim V'Shonim, and that's to be Mavas Sedra. It takes about an hour to be Mavas Sedra. I'm not talking about Rashi. That's fancy schmancy. It's great you can learn Rashi. But the halacha is to do Shnai Mikra V'Echatargim. It takes about an hour, even for a long parsha. But do it. It's a school to live long. And it's Arichas Yomim V'Shonim. It's a big thing, Arichas Yomim V'Shonim. You know, there's a lot of Torah on Arichas Yomim V'Shonim. But my wife says now, you know, the doctors say that she's on chemotherapy now. So the chemotherapy is working. But quality of life with chemotherapy is very, very hard. So she says she wants two things. She wants to live long, but she wants to live right. And that's Arichas Yomim V'Shonim. And that's Mavas Sedra. So the Rosh says, remember these things. But for our purpose today, the Rosh is warning us, don't put off straightening your marriage out. Because both a husband and a wife, one of the first things that they're going to be grilled for in the Mammon Hadin is, were you Mekayim v'simach es ishtoi? Were you an Ezer Kenegdoi? A person is going to be asked this. And you can't tell the Rabbeinu Shalom, do you know who I was married to, Rabbeinu Shalom? You can't say that because Rabbeinu Shalom made the shidduch. That, by the way, is something that we all need to think about. A lot of times people say, if I would be married to somebody else, things would be different. That flies in the face of the idea of bashert. The idea of bashert, it's funny, people think bashert is for before marriage. It's not. Because before marriage we have to do our ishtadlus. Right? You just can't say, well, what am I checking out? What do I have to check out for? It's bashert! Let me just get married, it's bashert. That's ridiculous. That's like crossing River Road and saying, I'm not going to look for a red light. If it's not bashert, I'm supposed to live, all the cars will get flat. You're going to become a pancake if you live like that. Right? Because there's such a thing like hishtadlus. You can't say, this thing about going to work, it's ridiculous. What do I have to go work for? I have my mezainis fixed to Rosh Hashanah. I'm not going to work. I'm getting myself a massage chair, and I'll show everybody the way it's done. The house is going to go in foreclosure very quickly. But why? The answer is, all that we're promised is only if we do our ishtadlus, our proper ishtadlus. By the way, the tricky thing with this is that, but if we do more than natural ishtadlus, we're not going to get anything extra. That's why the Torah is very against workaholics. Because you're only going to get what you're supposed to get, regardless of whether you do proper ishtadlus or excessive ishtadlus. Of course, the question is how to define excessive ishtadlus. That, by the way, is a very complicated forensic. It's very complicated. How do you diagnose proper ishtadlus? So, I have certain rules for diagnosing proper ishtadlus. Number one, a person is not supposed to sacrifice normal family life. That means if the husband or the wife never get to live together, then they're doing excessive ishtadlus. Excessive ishtadlus is if you always have to miss mincha b'minyan. That's excessive ishtadlus. So you'll say, but Rabbi Weiss, it's in the numbers. When I used to come home and eat supper at home, I couldn't pay my bills. And now that I'm moonlighting, I can pay my bills. So you have to understand, Hashem gets the last laugh. And Hashem says, you know, you think you're so smart, but did you notice that the roof leaked and you had to pay $16,000 on the roof? And did you notice that your health insurance went up 33%? And did you notice that the school refused to give you that break? That's because you went to work and you missed supper at home. So that money you're not getting. So I had to equalize it. So I gave you a hole in the roof, and I gave you a raise in the medical. The Rebbeinu Shalom has a way of equalizing things. Hishtadlis is proper hishtadlis, but that's a different share. I don't want to, we're getting off the topic. But the idea of bashert manifests itself after we're married. And that is that after we're married, 40 days before the creation of the embryo, a basko went out and said, Bas Ploini LePloini, the daughter of so-and-so to so-and-so. By the way, the reason why it's the daughter of so-and-so and not she to him is because usually the girl is younger than the boy, so when the boy was born, she wasn't born yet. So therefore it's Bas Ploini LePloini, because she wasn't born yet. But what's the idea of saying it before the creation of the embryo? Well, it's not enough that the baskol should go out in the delivery room? It's not enough for the baskol to go out when he becomes bar mitzvah? Why did the baskol have to go out 40 days before creation? And the answer is because we are created for our spouses. It's a very important thought. When Hashem made us, He made us for our spouses. So that I have a chip inside me made for Rebbetzin Weiss. It's like, you see the advertisement, Intel inside, right? I have a chip, which means, and listen to this very carefully, which means if we live right, we could make magic. So then you're tempted to say, but don't some people mess up and they don't end up with their basherta? People are very desperate to find excuses. Maybe I don't have my basherta, that's why it's so lousy. So I tell people one of my favorite words. When Yaakov met Esav, so he lined up the wives and the children, and Esav asked what sounds like a real ridiculous question. He says, Mi eila, who are these to you? I mean, what do you think, they're the milkman's children? What kind of a dumb question is that? And Yaakov doesn't say anything about the wives. He says, Abonim asher chonan elikim es abdecha. They're the children that God graced me with, your servant with. So what's the give and take over here? We know that when Yaakov and Esav were born, two twins were born, Rachel and Leah. And it right away went out that the younger one for the younger one and the older one for the older one. So Leah was supposed to go to Esav, and we know that's why Leah cried until her eyelashes fell out, right? Eine Leah Raka. When Esav saw Leah, he asked in a veiled way, Mi Eila lach. Eila is the same letters as what? Leah. Mi Leah lach, she's mine. And what did Yaakov answer? Habonim asher chonan elikim es abdecha. How could you think Leah is yours if I had a Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, 6 boys and Dinah from her? Could you still say that she's your basherta? When you have good children, then you know proof positive you're living with your basherta. That's the proof is in the children. And once you're living with your basherta, then, and it doesn't matter when you start, you know that if you live with the right tools, you could make with your wife a good life. You could make with your husband a good life. Because Hashem made it for you, and as everything else, Hashem wanted it to be good. Of course, Hashem wanted to pull something out of you that you should change. The Bali Musa say, Loi toiv heyoisa adam levadai. It's not good for man to be alone. Now, that's a very strange thing. A lot of people say it's great to be alone. I could turn on the air conditioner whenever I want. I could turn on the light or turn off the light whenever I want. I could do whatever I want. What do you mean, like toiv adam levadai? But toiv means how a person could better himself or herself. You don't better yourself when you live alone, because you're me, myself, and I. You do what you want. When you live together with another person, and then you have to alter, change, give in, compromise, that makes you a better person. So it's true. If you're not going to make changes, then it's not going to be good. But the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted the institution of marriage that both of us should work on ourselves and reach that where we complement each other and we make it good. Now, one of the first rules of marriage is that it's not natural for a marriage to be good. That's why it's not. Marriage in America should be a rotten experience. I mean, it's kind of a sobering thing to say, but that's why marriage has failed in America. The institution of marriage has failed in America. You know, Hallmark has already phased out the 50th anniversary card. They're thinking about phasing out the 25th anniversary card. It's just not happening. You know, I have one of my Talmidim, one of my Mispalim worked in the Port Authority, was married over 30 years, and they looked at him like, what is it like to be married to the same woman 30 years? Wow, I don't know anybody that's married 30 years, right? And I hear routinely Goyim talking, we don't expect it to get it right the first time. We don't expect that. You know, it's the institution of why? Because, I mean, just think about it. Where do we see our spouse? In the morning when we look like a fright. In the night when we've had it and have no patience. And Friday night, special time between husband and wife when we're a washed out dish towel. And we're supposed to make that a special relationship. Isn't that normal? Your marriage is usually as good as your davening. Ugh. Right? Think about it. Why do we have such a hard time with davening? Because we do the same thing in and out, day after day. That's why it's so hard to concentrate on that. It's the same old, same old. And it's the same thing. Except the davening doesn't get older and have more creases. Right? The spouse just starts getting older and heavier and grumpier and less patience. So the whole thing, b'derech hateva, is doomed to failure. And it's very important to realize that. It's very important to realize that naturally marriage is at best, slated to be humdrum at best. At worst, miserable. And that's why, in order to have a good marriage, each partner really has to work on it. Really, if anything needs effort, it's marriage. The rewards are stupendous. Number one, you get the shchin in the home. Shchin in the home comes with all kinds of blessings. Ish v'isha, shalom beinehem, shchin shriya beinehem. There are homes that have obvious shchin. They're much blessed. Number two, and I can't emphasize this enough, number two, we have a chance that our children won't get divorced. You know, somebody told me just recently from a very good family, the daughter got married 2 weeks ago and got divorced last week. The Shev Brachas wasn't even over. I mean, we're living in a world that's rife with divorce. I have every day a wedding invitation in my mailbox because I teach seminary for many, many years. I'm a Rav. I have Talmidim all over the world. So every day I have, a lot of times I don't know who the people are. Because the only way I'll know a girl's name in seminary is if she's a troublemaker. You know, people say it, they think it's good. Oh, you remember my daughter. It's no good if I remember. It's no good. You know, I only teach once a week, and I teach hundreds of girls. You know, so if I remember her, she, you know, ducked for cover. But anyway, but when I open up these invitations, sometimes it's like a phone book. There's so many names. So many blended marriages. This one is divorced. That one is divorced. You can't even make heads or tails who you know. There's so many names on the invitation. That's a scary thing. And the greatest insurance that our children, our grandchildren, should not get divorced is when they see from us how to behave with one another. So it used to be Shalom Bayis was important for our own happiness. Today, it's equally important for the children's happiness. It's like the famous Rabbi Twersky, one of the most prolific writers in the Jewish world, if not the most prolific English writer. He says certain ultra-Orthodox couples don't show physical warmth in front of the children. He says he has no problem with that, as long as they don't fight in front of the children also. But to do one without the other, or it's always been my opinion, I argue with educators on this, it's always been my opinion, and I've practiced this in my married life, and I've also shown physical warmth in front of the children. I believe in that. I believe the children have to see. I'm talking about giving a hug or something. You know, I'm a very big advocate of this. I know my own children, I always had a practice that every few months, maybe 3 months, I would go away a night with my wife. We would get babysitters, I would go away a night with my wife. We always did it, especially I'm a busy guy, so it was always a practice that we did. All our children, there's a fight who gets Tati's Starwood points to go away for a night. They all do it because they saw Mommy and Tati do it. I would never go a week without taking my wife out to eat. I give a daf, so it usually is lunch. I give 2 dafen in the night, but I always my children take their wives out to eat, even if they're good cooks. But they take them out to eat. The children do what they see at home. It's just the way it is. You know, I once bought for my children when they were young an elaborate dish set. And this was an elaborate dish set. Which had a tablecloth and goblets and china and shakers. And at that time, my oldest, all 3 of those are married by now, Baruch Hashem. But at that time, Nehemiah, Chani, and Yaakov were little children, tiny little children. And when I went to shul, they took out the dish set and they set a Seder table. And my wife was lying down on the couch while I was in shul, and she told me, Moshe Meir, it was mesmerizing. They set a table, and one was Tati, and one was Mommy, and one was the kids. And they set out to mimic us to perfection. Little kids. Like my son went like this. She said they even knew how to mimic how we looked at one another when they did something wrong. And it was something to see. But that's how children are. Children are sponges. And they sponge up the way we behave. And they notice. They notice when we're fighting. They notice if we yell. Right? That registers. That's the way to react to tension. You know, there are people that have what's called LFT. It's a condition. It's called low frustration tolerance. And the way they handle it is, "Aah!" And the children learn that. Now, it's a pasuk in Mishlei, ksil, kas b'chei ksil yanuach. Anger rests in the bosom of the fool. Because, you know, what do you keep in your breast pocket? A checkbook, your glasses. The fool keeps anger and pulls it out all the time. We have to be careful. Now, what talents can we work on that could be quick game changers? So, my Talmidim in the crowd probably heard this story. I mean, sure, Dr. Kazler. Kazler, you know, where's Dr. Kazler? Yeah. You know the mikveh story?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Anybody hear the mikveh story from me? Dr. Lewin? Really? That would be interesting. This story was told by Reb Shlomo Mibobov, the Frierdiker Bobov Rebbe, 2 Bobov Rebbes ago. Noam Sheberebes, who was such a sweet, holy man. Just that you should understand who he was when he was traveling out of war-torn Europe, escaping on a boat. The boat was being tossed at sea and everybody was deathly seasick. If you have never experienced seasickness, you can't describe it. Ein chacham kabbalah nisayin. Just like my wife says, we should never know from chemotherapy. You can't understand it. You can't understand seasickness. They managed to procure for the Rebbe a kosher sucking candy. And it seems to be they bought it from somebody for a huge amount of money on the boat. And they excitedly gave it to him and he declined it. And they begged him, he was seasick, they begged him to take it. And he said, while there are still Yidden facing the gas chambers, he's not putting a tzikkerl, a sucking candy, into his mouth. I mean, this is the Baba Rebbe. I mean, anybody that knew him, I used to go to him. He was. So the Baba Rebbe told this story. Baba Rebbe said that there was once a great Rebbe that visited a town. Now, I happen to know who the Rebbe was. It was the Kamarna Rebbe. It was a world-class Rebbe. It's a true story. He visited a town, and in the morning, before Shachris, he wanted to go to the mikveh. Rebbe goes to the mikveh. They told him Rebbe was sorry, there's no mikveh. He says, you have a Yiddish shtetl without a mikveh? He said, Rebbe, we don't have the money. So what did the Weiber do? The women 20 miles away, they have to travel to the mikveh. Shabbos, if they have to go to the mikveh, they can't stay in town. It's weird. So Rebbe says, I can't understand it. There's no one wealthy person in the town that can build a mikveh. You don't have a mikveh? He said, well, Rebbe, there is one wealthy person. So? He said, but he's a miser. He's a kamsen. He won't give it if it cost him his life. So Rebbe smiled and he says, now I know why I came to this town. I'm going to go and ask this man to build a mikveh. No, Rebbe, don't go, Bizyonis, he's gonna Fashem, you don't go. No. He says, listen, Bizyon is not such a bad thing. A person has to be humble. I'm going to go. And with God's help, we're going to get a mikveh. So he goes with his entourage to this man's mansion. Now, as they say, he didn't become a rich man for nothing. He recognized the world-class Rebbe when he saw one, and he welcomed him in. What a covet! Rebbe, come in. Just one thing, Rebbe. Just one thing. If you're coming for money, it's not my thing. It's not my thing. We believe in keeping it in the family. So the Rebbe tells him, I actually came to give you a bracha. So the rich man says, really? Come in. Brings him into his office, the whole Queen Elizabeth desk and the red crimson window treatments and the paneled walls, reeking from wealth. He sits the Rebbe down and he tells his wife to serve in the Pesach dishes. Now, I don't know if you know, there's such a minhag that if a gadol comes to your house, you take out the Pesach dishes and you make them chametz. When I first heard of this minhag, in the 70s, there was a tanis there was some kind of a terrible situation in Eretz Yisrael, and they called it tanis, and it was in the Svardish shul, they laned mincha vayechal, and Rav Moshe came. I still remember Yossel Fishman was laning, and Rav Moshe got Rishon, even though there were 100 Kohanim there, Rav Moshe got Rishon. And there was a possibility, we lived right next door to the Svardish shul, there was a possibility Rav Moshe would come up to break his fast by us. So my father, Olav Shalom, told my mother that if Rav Moshe comes, she should get the Pesach the Kedishas and make a chametz. So that's the minhag. And she looked at him, and she had already taken down the Pesach, a saucer and plates, and but Rav Moshe at the end didn't come. He didn't come, it was too late, he didn't come. But that's so he said, break out the Pesach the Kedishas, world-class Rebbe. So he sits down with the Rebbe, and he says to the Rebbe's offering me a boon. So he said, a boon, I'm a bracha. He said, well, if the Rebbe is giving me a bracha, it is something I need. So the Rebbe looks at him curious, what does a man that has everything need? He says, well, if you'll give me a bracha, so he said, give me a bracha that my wife should die. That's one way to have shalom bayis. So the Rebbe says, excuse me? He says, you heard me, Rebbe? You offered me a boon? Give me a bracha. He said that his wife should die. So the Rebbe looks at him, and he says, you must know that I'm not in the practice of giving such brachas. Say, hey, Rebbe, you offered me a blessing. Are you backing out? He says, listen, I can't give such a bracha, but I can give you advice. He says, okay. Says the Gemara says, that for the sin of making promises and breaking them, a wife could die. So I would advise you to make a big promise and then break it. Maybe she'll die. So he said, Rebbe, that's really genius. He says, you want to recommend me a promise? He says, yeah, sure. Go to Shul this Shabbos and make an announcement that you're going to build a new mikveh for the town. And then you break it. And maybe she'll die. Rebbe, I'm going to be in debt for you for life. So the Rebbe stays over. He goes to Shul on Shabbos. He goes to the Gabbai. He wants to make an announcement. The Gabbai looks, they hate this guy. The Gabbai looks at him suspiciously. He goes to the Rav, but the Rav was already clued in by the Rebbe, and the Rav nodded. So he goes to the Bima. Rabbi say, I have a big announcement. Everybody's quiet. I have decided to build a state-of-the-art, spanking new mikveh for the town. Nobly neder. Nobly neder. Pandemonium breaks out. The Rebbe's a Baal Meifus. The Rebbe's a wonder worker. Motzei Shabbos, the Shiva Tuvei, the 7 leaders of the city, descend on the mansion with plans and clipboards, and he comes and meets them with the dogs. So what are you doing on my property? So, I'm sorry to make a point, but so excited about the mikveh. So what mikveh? The mikveh you promised in shul. That mikveh, I lied. Did you hear me? I lied. Now get off the property before I set the dogs on you. Hey, they walk away muttering, what a scandal, what a Russia, what a... A week goes by, 2 weeks go by. After 2 weeks, the rich man makes an appointment with the Rebbe who stayed in town. So he comes in, and the Rebbe says, so how are things? He says, yeah, that's what I'm coming to talk to the Rebbe about. You know, I was never liked in this town, but now I am hated like anything. Now, I expected that, and it was worth it to get rid of her. But Rebbe, you know, I don't understand. She doesn't even have a sniffle. I mean, she's not even sneezing. I already bought a black suit. I ordered the coffin, and she's healthy. I mean, what gives? So the Rebbe says to him, well, so tell me, how are things between the two of you? He says, now you ask me that? She yells at me, I yell at her. She throws things at me, I throw things at her. It's a Gehenna. What do you think I wanted that for? So he says, so tell me, when you yell at her, do you yell so loud that everybody hears? He says, yeah, I'm a young guy. She's young. Of course everybody hears. So you mean when you yell at her, you're embarrassing her in public? Yeah, well, I said, that's a problem, because you're embarrassing somebody in public, it's like you're killing her. So it's like she's already dead, so it might not work. So he looks at him and says, you mean this might not work? He says, well, rest easy. It could still happen. Let me tell you what you have to do. He says, what do I have to do? He says, well, for the next 2 weeks, you have to be nice to her. He says, what do you mean? No, I'm saying you have to be nice to her. Rebbe, there's no other way. I'm afraid if you want her to die, you have to follow my advice. In the next 2 weeks, you have to be nice to her, and the Baba Rebbe would add over here and buy her presents. There's no other way. I didn't bargain for this, but there's no other way. Anyway, 2 weeks go by, midnight, in the middle of the night, there's a banging on the Rebbe's door. So the Rebbe opens up. What's the matter? What's the matter? Rebbe, you won't understand. So what happened? So Rebbe, you remember you told me to be nice to her? She says, yeah. I found out a strange thing. She's really a nice person. She says, so what's the problem? What's the problem? She's very sick. He said, well, my friend, hurry up and start building a mikveh. That's a true story. Now, the moral of this story, which is a very powerful moral in Shalom Bayis, is that the best way to get something is to give it. That's why the word for marital joy is sus. Sus is a palindrome. It's read both ways, the same. Marriage is a very reciprocal thing. And we get what we give. And therefore, when you want something in your life, in your married life, the trick is to initiate giving it. I'll give you an example. I'll never forget this happened many years ago when I was giving Daf Yomi Nagud of 14th Avenue. A couple called me from Borough Park that they were having terrible Shalom Bayis problems, and that they're holding by divorce if I would meet with them. So I told them I'll do one meeting with them. So I remember I said, let me speak to the wife first. So I sit down with her and I said, listen, I don't want a whole laundry list, a whole garbage list. Let's cut to the chase. What's the biggest problem? She said, oh, that's simple. He's a block of ice. He's granite. No feeling whatsoever. It's like being married to a glacier. So, okay, I say, she gives me some examples. Okay, good. I meet with him. I say to him, okay, let's cut to the chase. No laundriness. No. He said, oh, that's easy. She's a rock. No feeling whatsoever. But the answer is simple. They felt this need in one another. They married each other. At one point, one of them stopped giving, and the other one stopped reciprocating. Now, I was able to put my finger on it, that she had a difficult pregnancy, and she had some postpartum, and after that, she never really started giving again. And the husband never stopped reciprocating. and things started to fall apart. But that's a rule. Sometimes it's because of a sick child, sometimes it's because of a sick parent, sometimes it's because of a problem in a job. There are all kinds of reasons why somebody might stop giving. But the fact of the matter is that marriage is reciprocal. I tell a story that a husband comes to me, righteously indignant about his wife. He says, I can't take it anymore. The Rebbe's going to have to talk to my wife. What's the matter? She never laughs with me. The only time I hear her laughing is when she's on the phone with her friends. That's the only time. With me, she's never I can't take it. So I ask him, make up a name. I ask him, Yankel, when was the last time you laughed? Forget about laughed. When was the last time you giggled? Do you even know how to giggle? You're a sourpuss. Excuse me. You are. Why should she laugh with you? Her friends are laughing on the other side of the phone, so she laughs. That's the way it works. That's the way marriage works. What we want, we have to start giving. And we have to start giving even if it's undeserved. Because it's going to come back. We want smile. You know that in the Svardi Ksuva, there's an addition that I wish we could put in the Ashkenaz Ksuva. In the Ashkenaz Ksuva, there's 4 commitments. Ana eflach, I will work. I know that's a chiddush in some circles. Ana eflach v'oikir ve'ezain v'afarnes. I will work, I will cherish, I will feed, and I will clothe. And maybe shelter is included in that too. And by the way, some people wonder why we pledge work before cherish. Think about that. A wife would really want cherish first. But if somebody is not working, they don't have self-respect. Without self-respect, you can't give respect to somebody else. Chachmei Chazal knew that if you're not okay, if you're not either working or productively learning, you don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel good about yourself. You cannot cherish other people. But the Svardim adds something else. It's a beautiful thing. Svardim add, Ana asaber. I will smile. We don't have it. But it sounds simple, but I'm going to ask you a telling question. I once gave a whole shir on this. I'm going to ask you a telling question. When was the last time you initiated a smile at your wife? When do we usually smile? We hear something funny, we smile. We're reminiscing about a funny story, we smile. When was the last? It's a talent. You're in the car and your wife is coming out of a store you were waiting for, or bringing the kids, and you see her and you smile at her. When's the last time we do that? Or vice versa, a wife or a husband. The Svardim put this in the Ksuva, Ana saber. I will smile at you. It's a big thing. It's a talent. Now when you smile, the other person smiles back. That's the reciprocal nature of marriage. Now I'm going to present this to you in a little bit of a different way. Let's say a woman gets up in the morning and she looks in the mirror and goes, ah! Right? And then she decides she's getting rid of the mirror because it's a lousy mirror. That's ridiculous. Not the mirror's fault. It's only what you put into the mirror that you get. That's the way marriage is. Your spouse is a mirror. You're going to get from the spouse what you put into it. So obviously, people that put in very little, they expect, but they put in very little. And I'm not talking about cooking the meals and paying the bills, because that's supposed to be done by everybody. What do you put in extra in your marriage? The extra that you put in will give you extra in your mouth. You have to put in. People don't take the time to put in. To put in means knowing your spouse's dreams. I gave a drill where after the shir I'm going to have some of my svarim if somebody wants to buy my CD album on Pirkei Avos. I have some Shambaya CDs. I have a CD called The Marriage Workshop, and I give people a drill that they should sit down and think about 10 things they could do to make their spouse happy. I'm not talking about the laundry. I'm talking about extracurricular. Now, if you can't figure it out, you should start dating again. Each other, not somebody else. But you should start dating again. Because you have to know this. Like your spouse might have had a dream on a quiet Sunday, wants to go out fishing on a boat. They've been fantasizing about it for 25 years. Never had a chance to do it. Honey, why don't you why don't you rent out or go with a friend and go out fishing this, unless you want to go with them, which I doubt, but yeah. No, your wife has been dreaming once to sit in a bath with a book for half an hour, for an hour with candles, and just relax. She hasn't done it since the children were born, 30 years ago. But you write 10 things, what you think your spouse would want, and set out to fulfill them. You'll see it'll be reciprocated. And that's the kind of stuff that makes a marriage special. That's working on a marriage. We hit the hour point already. Wow. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. By the way, just to show you a little discipline that the Orchos Chaim LaRosh makes, that it's a game changer. A little discipline, which I found in my life was a game changer. As the Orchos Chaim LaRosh recommends making a bracha, closing your eyes. I can't tell you what a difference it makes for me. If I close my eyes when I make a Borei Minei Mezainis, I have more kavanah. But more than that, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch that when you make an Asher Yotze, you're not supposed to be booting up your computer. You're not supposed to be putting away your pajamas. You're not supposed to be making your coffee with the Keurig when you're making the Asher Yotze. You're supposed to stop and make the Asher Yotze. But nobody does that. But if you close your eyes, you're not going to make the coffee while your eyes are closed. You're going to bring your hands. You're not going to boot to your computer with your eyes closed. And you're not going to be putting away the clothing with your eyes closed. It forces you to have kavanah. It's an amazing game changer. I will tell you that all of us in life, all of us, like to be complimented. As a matter of fact, many of us have a favorite aunt or uncle. And if we think about the reason why they're a favorite aunt or uncle is because they always have nice things to say about us. I always knew you'd be something special. You're my favorite. You always like to meet up with that aunt and uncle in the coffee shop. We like people say nice things about us. And therefore it's obvious that if we learn to compliment our spouse, it will make the marriage sweeter. And it doesn't hurt to compliment. It doesn't cost to compliment. The only thing is it has to be sincere, because dvarim hayotzim min halev Nichnasim l'leiv, divrei emes nikarim. It has to be sincere. But to say, I admire this about you, I'm so happy I married you, when you do things like this, that really sweetens the marriage. So how come we compliment so much less than we criticize? We're always criticizing. Why didn't you take care of this? Why does it smell so bad in the house? Couldn't we have had supper ready? Why didn't you pay this bill? Ad nauseum, we're always criticizing. And criticism is the reason why many women go to so many Chinese auctions. They can't wait to get out of the house. It's the reason why men miss buses on purpose and stand out in the rain. They're looking forward to come home. Come home to that? So let me explain to you why, once again, it's absolutely not natural to compliment. It's 100% perfectly natural to criticize. It's simple. A man comes home, and it's Friday, and the steps look like an obstacle course. All the laundry and the boots and the shoes are on the steps. He comes in, he expects to smell the heavenly smell of chicken soup and cholent, and he sees the rotten eggs and the chicken bones from yesterday's supper. He looks around, the children are all grimy, running around the house, and he calls out, "Is this the city dump?" Does anybody know that it's Erev Shabbos over here? Now, let's fast forward to another house. Walks in, he smells the heavenly smell of cholent, bubbling pachah. His wife comes out to greet him with a smile, with a freshly made latte. And the children are walking around with bows in their hair, freshly oiled and powdered from the bath. Does he say anything? He says, "Okay, I'm just going to get ready now." What? If everything is good, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way it's supposed to be. We're not motivated to say anything. But if something is missing, what's going on over here? Compliments are not natural. Case in point. A wife goes into the butcher, and he says to her, "You have some nerve coming in here with your bill unpaid. Please, in front of all the other customers, please don't come into the store unless you're bringing a check." She walks into the grocery, and the grocer says, "Oh, how much are you paying today?" "I'll pay for what I buy." "Oh, no, you're not buying in this store anymore. What do you think, I'm made out of cash?" She comes home and she says, to her husband, "You're a failure. My mother told me not to marry you." But what happens if all the bills are paid and she goes into the butcher and he says, "Mrs. Rosenzweig, I got the choices filet mignon for you in the back. Come on in and pick it out. How many pieces you want?" She goes to the grocery, and all of a sudden he says, "Excuse me, customers, do you need something?" Does she come home and say, "What a provider you are"? What's that sign? We're not motivated to say compliments. It's not, that's business as usual. What do you think I married him for? But if something's wrong, so again, that's what it means to come and hear a Shalom Bayis shir. We want to motivate ourselves to make our marriages more magical, to compliment, because compliments, appreciation, it just makes life so much more appreciated. I'm appreciated. My husband recognizes that he's a lucky man. My wife sees that she couldn't have done better. Now, I want to conclude, we really haven't covered anything, but I want you to invite me once again in the Yovel, and if I'm going to go over, you're going to say, Weiss, get rid of him, he's but I would like to talk a moment about how important loyalty is. And loyalty in marriage, think about, we have a whole list of Eneshes Chaya, a whole list of description. What's the first thing we say about it? Botach bo leiv bayla. Her husband knows that he could count on her. Come what may, she has his back, even if he's wrong. One person in life he has to be able to count on. Corporate America, cutthroat. You never know when you're going to have pink slip even after 20 years. Monday there could be a pink slip. You don't know. At least there's one person in life you could count on, no matter what. Botach balei bayla. That's the concept of bedovak be'ishtay. You never embarrass your spouse in public. That's being a traitor to the marriage bond. No matter what it is. Even though there's some spouses that have such a feeling, you're not nice to me in private. Let people see how you are in public. You could feel that way, but you can never act on it. Because that's being traitorous to the marriage bond. When you go under the chuppah, you're making a statement like Rav Palm told the secular woman who asked her, why is the bride playing Ring Around the Rosie with the groom? And Rav Palm said, because he's making a statement, she's making a statement, from now on, he's the center of my universe. We pledge that under the chuppah, that she is the most important person in my life. And the ruination of that is to embarrass your spouse in public. Loyalty is something that needs to be nurtured and kept at all times. You have a problem, you go to a Rav. You go to a wise Rosh Hashiva. But when I say a Rav that knows Shalom Bayis. Not all Rabbanim know Shalom Bayis. For example, if a Rav is going to ask the couple together to say what the problem is, that shows he right away he doesn't know Shalom Bayis. Maybe she's afraid of him, and she's not going to say the truth in front of him. You need to have a Rav that knows Shalom Bayis. And some Rabbanim will say, it's not my thing. Right? Never go to a therapist that's not religious. Never. The therapist that's not religious might be a good therapist, but he might not think it's that important to save the marriage. He might recommend that a good affair, fling, would be healthy for you. You don't go to a therapist that's not religious. That's a big no-no. They also don't understand our norms and our priorities. What do you mean he has to get up in the morning to go to shul? That's ridiculous. If he's not religious, he's not for therapy. And he could be, by the way, a dynamic, good therapist. But not in our world. Because our world works differently. Has different norms, has different needs. There's no such thing as, well, you have to worry about yourself first. Forget about the children. There's no such thing. So you never go to a therapist that's not religious. But before you go to a therapist, go to a Rav. I'll tell you why. I got no time to tell you that in 20 visits, I'll take care of your problem. I got to take care of it tomorrow if I can. It's very important. You have to realize that. You go to a therapist, he's getting paid or she's getting paid to have 20 visits. I'm not getting paid to see you. Or even if I am getting paid to see you, I don't have the time to see you. So I want to solve your problem as quickly as possible. And sometimes problems can be solved quickly. And people, what I always tell people is you just have to flick that switch. Sometimes people don't realize. And by the way, sometimes therapy means group therapy. It sounds very queer, but I found in anger management problems, group therapy is the best thing. Because there's certain men that don't realize that they're treating their wives like a tyrant. And me? I get along with everybody. Can't be. Then they get in a room with CEOs of companies that fess up and say that they have anger problems, and all of a sudden, if he could have it, I could also have it. The fact that I'm successful in one thing doesn't necessarily mean that I can't have an anger problem. I've had success with people with anger, severe anger problems. Now, I like to tell people, who is this whippersnapper Weiss that he thinks he could give Shalom Bayis? Who am I? I have one credential. I'm a Rav now, B'li Ayin Hara, for 34 years. I have not had a divorce in my shul in 34 years. Now, of course, everybody in my shul is miserable. No. But I will tell you, it's not for work, for lack of work. One couple I separated for 2 years. Another wife swallowed a bottle of Icatrin to try to check out. So there were some challenges along the way. But we worked on it. And these people walked down children to the chuppah afterwards. So it can be done. It can be done. But like I said in the beginning, it's not natural to have a good marriage. So if you're not working on your marriage, at the best, your marriage can be a lot better. Marriage needs a lot of work. And by the way, we're in the texting, emailing, IMing, Facebooking, Twittering world that we live in, nobody has time for nothing. Ask yourself, when was the last time that you stopped to think? Now, I'm not sure. If you're not sure what the word think means, when you go home, Google it. And look up what think means. People don't think anymore. If they have time, they check their email. They check their text. They text. Right? Who thinks? It's very important to think. It's very important to be mizbodeid. It's very important to make cheshbon. Make a cheshbon. How could I make my marriage better? Make that 10-item list. It's a good start. I'll give you another drill. I said I was ending. I lied. Well, I'll end with this. Then, I don't know, should I take a few questions? Yeah? I'll take a few questions. Just don't incriminate yourself. I have a friend, I give another drill. And that is, in a lot of homes, Sunday is a problem day. That's why it's good to come to a Shalom Bayis shiur on Sunday. You're not fighting during the shiur, But Sunday is a big problem, because what happens, the first part of the Sunday, people fight about what they're going to do. And the second half, they bemoan that there's no time to do anything anymore. Right? So I tell people that they should... So some people say that you should spend one Sunday doing what you want, one Sunday doing what she wants, one Sunday doing what the kids want, and one Sunday you fight, But what I tell people to do, and by the way, this is a fun drill. It's a fun thing to do. It really is write a list of 20 things that could be done on Sunday. Large lox and omelet breakfast. Big nap. Laundry. Visiting the in-laws. Right? Going to museum. Right? Write a list of 20 different things. Little League. 20 different things that could be done on Sunday. And then rate it from 1 to 20. And compare notes. You might find to your delight that big nap is number one for both of you. You never realize that. You're going to sleep in. Make yourself the happiest people. But that'll at least give you the knowledge of what each other wants. That's living for each other. At least then you could say, okay, I see that a big breakfast is important to you, so we could do that some Sundays. And let's plan the menu. You want a vanilla malt shake? Let's buy a vanilla malt shake machine. You want pancakes? Let's find the best recipe with vanilla and cinnamon and strawberry topping. We'll figure it out. You always had a hankering to go to the planetarium and the Museum of American History. I never knew that. So we'll plan trips. You want to go to Madame Tussauds? Good, fine, We'll plan trips, but at least it gives you an idea that's working on Shalom Bayis. And by the way, that never stops, and we have to grow with it. May it be the will of Hashem that in the schus of trying to better things, we should be zeicha to have sweetness in our homes, in our lives, be a good role model for our children, and to have the Bias Mashiach B'meher V'yameinu.
The Rav has agreed to answer several questions. If anybody would like to ask them privately, you can submit them to me, and we can ask them anonymously. Does anybody have anything like to be addressed publicly at this point?
Yes.
I'm just saying, you had a good sprachwort. They usually say, when you find yourself a nice, you should let your shirt and say, Gid Gedanken. So you had mentioned that too. With finding somebody, so I'm just working on the sprachwort that I used to always say.
Yeah, well, you see that, by the way, it's good that you brought that up, because I tell people that if you have a good marriage, not one Shemona Esrei should go by without davening for your spouse. If you daven Shemona Esrei and you don't pray for your husband, you don't pray for your wife, that's, Hashem says, I don't understand. Why aren't you praying for your spouse? Ishte kegufay. So whether it's in Sim Shalom, whether it's in Rifa'enu, whether it's in Shema Koleinu, we should daven for each other. That's being a good spouse. Anything else? Yes.
For those of us who have kids that are starting to hit the marriage age, what do you recommend in terms of helping them find their share? Okay,
so first of all, I just did a series of 2 shiurim called What to Look For on a Date. You can, if you log on to TorahAnytime.com, right now these 2 shiurim are on the home page. The first one is called What to Look For a Date, Gesher Ladas Seminary. And the second one is What to Look For on a Date, Part 2, Pninim Seminary. So those are 2 lectures where I go through item by item, from smoking to religiosity, from introvert, extrovert, in between, to a recreational compatibility. I go through that very, very carefully. I would recommend those 2 shiurim for either, it's actually given to girls, but it's also great for boys. Most of it is great for boys. I would recommend watching that. But to give, since the question was asked, to give a very, very capsulized version of what to look for, I tell all my children, 5 of my 6 children are married now, but I told each and every one of them, and my lone daughter that's home now as well, kind, kind, and kind. That's what you should look for. If you marry a kind person, you'll have a happy life. And of course, we need the religiosity, and we need the health, and we need the ability somehow of a plan to make a parnasa, and we need other stuff as well. But I am frightened when I get calls. My wife and I are like a clearinghouse for the boys and girls in Staten Island, and I get calls from parents, and they don't even ask about the midas of the child. They want to know, is there money? They want to know the size of the dress. They don't even ask anymore. Is it any wonder we have so many divorces? So again, my answer is kind, and kind. Because I see it afterwards, and I know those that have kind, caring, courteous spouses are very happy in their marriage. Next question. I know it's a simple subject, and everybody wants to go home. We'd like to thank Dr. and Mrs. Lewin. If I ask you to stop for a moment, if anybody wants a signed copy of my Power Benching or Passionate Judaism, or the hardcover from at $25, the soft at $20. I also have a album of CDs which I made. It's 12 CDs on the entire Pirkei Avos, so you could go through the entire Pirkei Avos through the summer. I have that. I have 2 CDs on marriage. I wasn't able to bring more. I just didn't have a chance to make the copies. If you would like to, like Dr. Castle, if you would like to, like Dr. Lewin did, to subscribe to my CDs and get one every week, you could subscribe now as well to that. So I'm going to take it out of the box. Thank you for coming. Thank you to the Lewins for hosting us.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.